Nakeia! Oh, I'm so happy to have you here today.
I'm so very happy to be here.
Girl, how are you feeling after this Habits for Healing? I haven't gotten through it all, but I've read so much of it, and it's such an incredible guidebook for people. I feel like everyone on their life's journey should have a copy of this on their bedside table.
And they should.
Yeah.
I'm feeling all the things that it takes to create something like that, all the things that it takes to maintain myself while presenting it and birthing it to the world. But I feel good. Thank you for checking in on me. You're one of those ones that has been helpful. And I'm excited to talk to you today. I really am.
Me too. And I have to say, my favorite part is your relationship with your grandmother. Because my relationship with my grandmother, who is still here, is just so profound. And I would notice when I'd read about your grandmother, I'd get chills because we had so many similarities. And I think a lot of people listening might have had that mother or grandmother who worked over and did over and beyond trying to love us, but they didn't necessarily teach us self-care. So can you talk a little bit about your relationship with your grandmother and how you learned self-care by watching what was actually not there?
Yeah, so my grandmother brought me home from the hospital. My parents were teenagers, and so they gave my grandmother that gift and me that gift of allowing us to do life together. So she was the first person I called mom, although I had and still have a really good relationship with my mom. She was mom as well. And I watched her do all of the things. She was a pillar of our family, a pillar of the community, the go-to for everyone and anyone except herself. And I noticed that my entire life. She and I would go back and forth on how much she was doing for others versus herself, how much time she was taking out for herself when it came to finances, when it came to self-care, and even when it came to just supporting her emotional well-being and physical. She had a lot of physical ailments because she worked her entire life, multiple jobs when I was growing up to 3 at a time. And so when you see a woman like that in the community, in your family, you think, wow, she's a giver. She sacrifices everything. It is absolutely honorable, but it didn't serve herself at the same time. And so what I wished for her is to remain that same version of herself that everyone knows and loves, but to invite some of that into her own life, into her own space and her own well-being. Right. And so I knew I wanted to be like her. And everyone who looks at my book now, my website, looks at my social media, listen to my words, they're always saying things like it's a warm hug or it feels, and I don't internalize that because that's my grandma. Right. I got that from her words, her storytelling, all of that is her. I didn't intend to have her in the book the way that I did. When I set out to write it, it just ended up that way. And everyone who has been following me knows that she transitioned 4 years ago. And that actually prompted my journey to authorship. My first book was written out of survival, grief, just trying to maintain. And here we are with this third book, Habits for Healing. And she is at the center of the book. And self-care has been the center of my life over the past 4 years. It's the only way I survived.
Oh, I love it. That's the only way you survive. Yes. And just imagine, our ancestors, the ones they had to put everyone before them.
They did.
And now because of their sacrifices, we have the privilege. I feel like it's a privilege to self-care as much as we self-care.
Absolutely.
Because we didn't grow up seeing that. So can you talk about some of the things, some of your habits specifically that you've incorporated to just bring a little bit more self-care? I know you, like me, are big on boundaries.
Absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit about that and maybe 2 others that you're like, these are my top 3 go-to.
My journey started just like everyone else's, the hair and the nails.
Yeah.
I was at the hair salon every other Saturday since I was 10. I actually started getting my nails done at 15 and then got my grandmom to start getting her nails done. So that was our thing. So I thought about the superficial opportunities to care for myself, make sure I smelled good, looked good, and felt good that way. But what I realized is that I was still at a deficit emotionally. I was still at a deficit when it came to my energy level and even when it came to my mood. And so after some research and just kind of thinking and reflecting on myself, I realized I needed to introduce things like alone time, to do nothing sometimes. I take drives in the car. I actually start the chapter off. That's my favorite thing. And you asked when I came in today, how was the drive? I was so looking forward to getting in the car and driving, listening to music. Sometimes I don't listen to anything but my thoughts. I pray. I call my friends. Some of the ideas and concepts from the book happen. So anytime I'm able to get alone time, that is self-care. Also, caring for others is self-care for me as well. Yeah. And so a lot of times we think about self-care as selfish or centering ourselves, which I see no problem with. But we can also prioritize the things that bring us joy, the things that align with our purpose and calling, that makes us feel like ourselves. And so whenever I'm serving others, I'm serving myself, and that's a form of self-care. And then there are the boundaries. Yes. Where my no needs to stand on its own. Yeah. And, distance between myself and some people and some things. Is necessary. I talk about a tough conversation with my grandmother when I was a kid where I had to erect a boundary between her and I, and I'll let you read the book so that you'll get that story. But having those conversations that are tough and where you're asking for what you want and need from someone who may not see it your way, that's a form of self-care as well. So absolutely alone time. How I and when I serve others, and then how I serve myself by protecting myself and prioritizing my well-being.
That's so beautiful. And then when you said boundaries and tough conversations, it made me think of a point in the book. And I think you might have been 9, I'm not sure how old, but you had to choose custody between your birth mom and your grandmother. And what a hard choice for a 9-year-old. Were you 9?
I was 9. Yeah. I was 9. It was like 3rd or 4th grade.
Right. So have you ever thought back at that moment, or how do you feel? Do you remember how you felt at that moment? And now being an adult, how do you feel about that moment?
I remember the moment like it was yesterday. It was one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make. My grandmother was caring for me up until that point. And my mom, whom I had a really good relationship, she literally lived around the corner. Yeah. So I could walk through like a gate from the projects to her house and see her whenever I wanted to. And there was never an issue. Yeah. But my grandmother wanted to put me on her health insurance at work. Right. And you can't do that without guardianship. So she just went in to request guardianship. In her mind, it was literally about paperwork. But when my mom got the documents in the mail, it was about her baby as well. Yeah. And so there was this tough conversation between the adults, and we had to go to court. And the judge ended up calling me into his chambers and asking me whom I wanted to live with. Right. And I said both. And he said, at this moment, I need you to decide who you want the person to be, your caregiver, your caretaker, your guardian. If they allow you to still see both, the way you have, that's great, but we need this documented. And I don't know where the wisdom came from outside of God. But I had this conversation with myself, like, what do I need? What would be the best decision? And I asked for my grandma. Yeah. I asked him to go outside and talk to my mom first, though. Yeah. And I shared that I did have that conversation. And my mom was so loving. Yeah. She was so careful with me. And I've never shared this publicly, just between you and me and everyone who tunes in. But she said, if you choose your grandmother, I won't be mad at you. Yeah. And she wasn't. She knew my choice. I told her why. I gave her details as to why. And she said, do what you got to do. And we talk about it to this day. Yeah. I tell her, thank you for allowing me to make that choice. And thank you for birthing me. She was 15. Yeah. And so she carried me, had to go to school, throughout the neighborhood, pregnant. people saying you should get an abortion. She said no. That was the best gift she ever gave me, which was life. So we joke, and I say, thank you. And she laughs like, thank you. Like, what else was I going to do? Like, this is my thing. Right. So, yeah, it was tough. But that was I call that my first act of self-care.
Yes. And that's what I absolutely love. It's such a hard decision to make. But one thing that you said that I totally resonate with, it was divinely guided. Like, sometimes I feel like when we get still and we listen, even as young ones, we can be divinely guided. And I feel like the more that we give our children time away from the phone, away from the TV, where they can just breathe and be and maybe even play or draw, they can be available for that as well. I definitely, now that I look back on my parents growing up, feel like having quiet time and time in nature has helped guide my path. So I'm glad you had that moment as a young person to seek inward towards your own wisdom or for the wisdom of God, because I feel like people don't talk about that enough and how profound that is, because as children we have less distractions and imprints on us than we do when we're adults. So we actually are very, very intelligent. We're very honest sometimes. Even like we're scared to hurt feelings when we're adults, but children, they're honest. They'll tell you like, that's ugly. No, I don't like his energy, you know. So yeah, I think that was really beautiful that you bring that up as profound act of self-care, which leads me to my next question. Are you ready to dive into a world of radiant skin and natural beauty? Our sponsor, Pacifica Skincare, invites you to experience the transformative power of clean, vegan skincare products. Pacifica believes that beauty should be a reflection of your values. That's why they're committed to creating products that are good for your skin and the planet. From nourishing cleansers to rejuvenating serums and everything in between, Pacifica has your skincare needs covered. Say goodbye to the harsh chemicals and hello to glowing, healthy skin. Pacifica has innovative formulas, and each product is carefully crafted using plant-based ingredients, botanical extracts, and powerful antioxidants, ensuring that you get the best nature has to offer. But Pacifica is more than just skincare. It's a celebration of self-expression and individuality with a wide range of products for every skin type and concern. Pacifica empowers you to embrace your unique beauty with confidence. If you're ready to elevate your skincare routine, visit pacificabeauty.com today to explore their collections and discover your new skincare essentials. Plus, enjoy free shipping on orders over $50 and use code Koya15 for 15% off. Transform your skin and enhance your natural radiance with Pacifica. You spoke about how you wanted things to be different as you became a mother. So can you talk about some of the things that you realized, like, okay, this is what I have to do to take care of myself. I love my children, but if I don't do these things, I'm not going to be the best mother I can be.
Yeah, we don't talk enough about the grief that comes along with doing what's best for you, honoring your purpose and calling, doing the things that you feel are divine to you and unique to you. And just like I said a moment ago, how I made a decision to care for myself by asking myself what I needed and deciding that I needed to be with my grandmother. But I also talk about the grief of making that decision. Because it did upset my mother's family. It did upset me. And it also kind of contributed to me feeling rejection. Because up until that point, I didn't understand why I had to live with my grandmother and not my mom. I felt rejected because I wasn't able to wrap my head around adult decisions like that. Right? So not having that relationship with my mom impacted how I saw myself and how I saw my future relationship with the child. And so when I got pregnant, I literally paused my entire life to get myself together emotionally, physically, spiritually, because I didn't want her to have to make tough decisions and have tough conversations like I did at my hand. And so I really just wanted to be a good mother. And what ended up happening is I was projecting that trauma, you know, that rejection, those feelings of loss, whatever, not being enough, onto her by trying to be hyper vigilant and doing all the extra stuff. And one day my daughter, when I asked her, you know, what can I do better? She's like, you can calm down. You could tone it down a notch. Like, you're doing too much for everyone else. Stop being so selfless.
Yeah.
And I was shocked. Yeah. Because I'm like, here I am living my entire life right now for you and eventually her brother, and I'm doing it wrong. But what I realized is that I was passing down those negative images and messages and modeling of self-care like my grandmother did. Yeah. Sacrifice, going above and beyond at the expense of myself. And so I had to have another conversation. Let me just say, I love talking to myself.
Yes.
I love asking myself what I want and need. I love asking myself if this is the way. I love talking to God. I love talking to my family. When you ask direct questions, you get direct answers, right? And so I'm like, what do I need? And my daughter helped me out by saying, you need to take better care of yourself. That will model a really good habit of self-care, a habit of boundaries, a habit of acceptance, all the things I talk about in the book. And I kind of modeled our relationship after not the one I thought I wanted when I was a kid and projecting, but the one I could have based on where I was in my life at the moment.
That is so beautiful. I just love your daughter. It was just real, right? I'll tell you, the young kids, they're like, just really tell it like it is. And also, I'm glad that you brought up earlier grieving and the grief that comes with making choices. Right. I think that's something we don't talk about a lot. Right. When you choose self-care, there is something that you're giving up that you might have to grieve, especially if you love it as well. Like, you might love a certain type of food, but that food does not love you back. Absolutely. So you have to pick a food that you love that is also good for you. But there might be a grieving that you can't eat that processed this or that. You can't eat your mom's mac and cheese every Sunday, you know, or every day, you know. So I love that you brought up the grief, like, around your mom, and at that time, like, really having to be like, wow, I didn't even see it like this, but now that I had to make this big decision, oh, dang. Now I feel like I lost. And that also speaks to what you mentioned earlier about the emotional well-being, right? And just how we are wrapping our emotions around what happens to us. And so can you talk a little bit, because I know before you were a professional, best-selling author, you were a social worker. So can you talk a little bit about how you deal with, like, grief and going through some of those harder things, like, as you've come up and now a mother and an author and an entrepreneur and all these things?
Right. I love that question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. What I realize is that when we are surviving a difficult past, childhood trauma, an abusive relationship, neglectful relationship, divorce, whatever, right? There is a moment where we're in it, we may feel out of control. Like, we don't have any control over our actions, our choices, what's happening in our lives. It's at the hand of someone else, or our circumstances are just overwhelming. One of the things we get to do when we are healing is reclaim some of that control. And so, and a part of reclaiming control is accepting the things you can't control. And so one of the first things that I did with my own life, this work I do with the world, started with myself. I looked at the things I could not control, which was who my parents were, growing up in the projects, not having money, how other people saw me or may have treated me. And then I looked at how or what I could control, which was my response to all of those things, how I treated and talked to myself, the story that I wanted to create for my future. And so for myself and for my clients over the years, I've just been trying to highlight what we can control and highlight how we can grow in maturity in our responses and in our emotions in a way that really affects and contributes to everything we can't control, right? And so although it sounds a bit, out there, it's really close to our chest. It really starts with, what do we need? I ask myself that every day and every moment I feel out of control. How can I give myself what I need? With the resources, the time, the capacity, the health, the energy level, whatever that I have, how can I give myself some of those things? For me, at 10 years old, it was just an education. I can go to school, that's free. I go to public school. Then I can go to college, shout out to loans, because that's what I did to get through school. And then keep going. What
Yeah.
else can you give yourself? And then you'll see that you've created this life full of things that you actually want, need, and that are useful.
Right.
And so I talk about clients that I work with. It's not just my stories in the book, it's my clients' stories. And it was basically me just sitting with them and saying, what do you need?
Yeah.
How can you give that to yourself?
I love that. Everyone ask yourself, what do you need?
Yeah.
It reminds me of what I have in my phone to this day. I think I started doing it maybe 7 years ago. I have 2 questions. How do you feel? And what do you need? Ask myself at that noon. Sometimes it might be water. Sometimes it might be I'm feeling angry. I need to go outside and yell. Sometimes it might be lonely. Maybe I need to see a friend in the evening. But asking myself, how do I feel and what do I need? It really does help. I love that check-in and that you do that too. As I read your book, I'm like, this is like my soul twin right here. You know, because there's so many things that they seem simple.
They are.
But a lot of times people don't ask themselves, like, what do you need? What do you need? So I think that is absolutely brilliant. And I do love how you share your clients' stories.
I do.
What do you think was the most profound transformation that you witnessed outside of your own?
It's so many.
I know.
But I think inside the book, I always talk about the women I work with, and there are always a bunch of, women cheering me on in the comment section, social media, my inbox. But there are men in my inbox as well doing the work. And so I think it was like maybe last week or the week before, someone said, is this book just for women? And I was like, no, it's for whomever. However you identify whatever you need, the book is there for you. But my favorite demographic to work with as a social worker and counselor was with men in correction. And so I talk about Mr. Smith in the book.
Yeah.
And it's a really good story because we don't always see criminals the way I'm able to highlight Mr. Smith. Of course, he did what he did and he was where he belonged, but he was also a father. Yeah. And he was someone's son. And there was a lot of grief there, a lot of pain there, a lot of things that he just wasn't tapping into. And what I loved about our connection is that he would like huff and puff to come to my office. They had to come and see me once a week for our sessions and then every day for class. But he would get behind the closed door, or the door wasn't closed, but behind my door where there was no one else there, and he would just release himself. He would relieve all of that tough exterior, all of the pretending, and he would just talk. By the end of our time working together, he realized he needed to practice some of the habits: acceptance, letting go, self-forgiveness, and remembering who you are. And so anyone who remembers who they are, chooses to be who they truly are, not who they pretend to be, not who others expect them to be, not the projections, not the circumstance, that is the most beautiful transformation for me. Right. So Mr. Smith, make sure y'all read that story.
Yes.
That's my favorite in the book.
That is so beautiful when you're able to see someone, remove the veil, right? And really show you who they really are. And I feel like we need more of that, like just safe spaces where we can really be who we really are, right? Do you feel like that's happening more and more? And how are you creating space for that?
I do. I think this is a beautiful era we are living in. Yeah. I'm calling it our healing era because you can't go on social media without hearing about therapy, boundaries, self-care, all the things that, we talk about, the practices for our well-being. Like you teach us eating habits and yoga and all the movement. But I think we were struggling as a collective to identify what those things will look like in our lives. Like I can look on your page and see all of the things, but how does that look in my life based on where I am, my circumstances? Like I have health issues that causes me to be overweight in this season of my life. There's nothing I can do. Trust me, I've tried. And so I could say, I'm not healing. I'm not doing this work. I shouldn't be out here teaching others. Or I can say, this is my capacity. This is the body, this is who I am, and this is how I honor it. It was important for me to write a book that I offered other people in service of themselves. At the end of each chapter, you get to ask yourself, okay, I heard the story. I saw her client work. I see the habits. How do I make this practical? How do I make this real in my life? And so I do love this era because we're talking, we're crying, we're going to therapy, we're going to yoga, we're practicing all the things. And now we get to really internalize that.
Yes.
And make it real in our lives.
Are you ready to revolutionize your skincare routine with clean, ocean-inspired products? Say hello to Osea Malibu, the ultimate destination for luxurious, eco-conscious skincare. Osea Malibu gives the power of nature to nourish and heal your skin. Their products are carefully crafted using organic, sustainably sourced ingredients from the sea, giving you a radiant glow while protecting the planet. Say goodbye to harsh chemicals and hello to glowing, healthy skin with Osea's wide range of products, from cleansers and moisturizers to serums and masks. Osea has everything you need for your complete skincare routine. It's not just about what's in their products, it's also about what's not. Osea is committed to clean beauty, meaning their formulas are free of toxins, synthetic fragrances, and animal cruelty. Whether you're dealing with dryness, acne, or just want to pamper your skin, Osea has a solution for you. Experience the transformative power of sea-inspired skincare with Osea Malibu. Ready to elevate your skincare game? Visit OseaMalibu.com and use code Koya10 today to explore their collections and discover your new skincare essentials.
I love that. And I love that you said, how it's different for me than it is for you, because I feel like, wellness is not this one size fits all antidote. It's like well-being looks different in my life, in your life, in a child's life. And everyone has everyone's well-being should look different. Even me and my fiance, we work out a lot together. Yeah. But in putting our schedule together over and over again, I realized sometimes we need to be separate. Sometimes I have certain needs that he doesn't have a need for, and sometimes he has needs that I don't need. And so it's really important for us to have inspiration, things that align us with spirit, but also realize we're still going to have to figure it out for ourselves. Even when people read your book, they're like, okay, this is her habits. Now, how, like you said, how does that look like in my life? Right. And I think you do a really, really great job of your approach and how you welcome people in with that warm hug. That's how you speak. That's how you write.
Shout out to my grandma.
Yes, shout out to the grandma. So with that, as you're moving into your third book, what is something that you really want to make sure people take away, after they read this book?
Another beautiful question, because I think I wrote it and there are tons of intentions behind it. For one, I want everyone to feel like they can have an accessible approach to healing. For me, healing is a series of choices, mindset shifts, and habits that contribute to us just simply being who we can at our best in every season of our lives, right? But what I also want is for you to have this as an offering, right? And a resource for you to reclaim your life back to yourself. It's called Habits for Healing. Reclaim your purpose, peace, and power, because those are the three things that are at risk when we are not in our healing work, right? Another beautiful habit in the book is accountability, right? Because although there are things that are different, in our bodies and our circumstances, that's not an invitation for us to resign, to do nothing. So it's like, oh, I'm not well, I'm gaining weight. I still get up and work out every day. Right. I still drink my green juice every day. I have my Pepsi as well. I'm not going to lie. But hey, that's better than things I could be doing. The purpose is to just identify what that looks like for you, make sure it's accessible, and reclaim the truth of who you are. People will love, honor, and respect the truest version of yourself. Right. It's the version you pretend to be that you struggle with. And so even if that's outside of your community, coming into your community, watching these podcasts that you offer us, reading both of our books, and just saying, okay, what can I do to reclaim my purpose, my peace, my power?
I love that. Reclaim your purpose, your peace, and your power.
That's it.
And I feel like we've touched on a little bit, but can you really guide us through okay, what does it look like to reclaim your purpose? What does it look like to reclaim your peace? And what does it look like to reclaim your power?
So I start the first chapter the first section, with reclaim your purpose. For me, purpose is defined as becoming the best version of yourself. That's how I identify. I exist to be me at the fullest, most beautiful, honorable, whatever that looks like. That's my purpose. Right. When I do that, I uncover things like my gifts, my talents, my skills, my interests, love, and all of that. But my purpose is just to be at my best. So I start with self-care. Yeah. I also talk about letting go, because we don't think about that being a part of our purpose, but how can we really affect our world and the world around us if we are carrying trauma from the past? Yeah. We like to call it baggage, but I learned from clinicians it's actually a trauma response. And so the things that you are holding on, the people you are holding on to, we have to release those things if we are actually going to be in our purpose. Yeah. And then I move in our other habits, and I move into reclaim your peace, right? Because often, we keep the peace of other people. Yeah. We don't tell our full story. Right. We don't honor the truth of who we are. And so in there are things like acceptance. I talk about my relationship with my dad, which wrecked my peace for years. And when I accepted him and our story, it brought me so much peace, and our relationship so much peace. There are things like minding your own business, which for me, as someone who was diagnosed with codependency, I like to save people. I like to mind other people's business. I worried about what people thought of me and how they felt about me. Not taking things personally is a part of that. Reclaiming your peace, and then reclaiming your power, which essentially is not settling for what your circumstances, your community, society. There are people who don't have children and they feel like they are not themselves because they didn't do this. Because other people are saying you're supposed to have children, you're supposed to do these things. Or their path to motherhood or, being in partnership with someone else or in business is different than everyone else's. Well, guess what? That is okay. Yeah. You don't have to settle for the projections. You can reclaim the story of who you are and reclaim your power. So I just try to identify practical ways to do that. Right. What does remembering who you are look like for you? In the book, I talk about someone who is simply going by their given name. They're not just answering to mom or, sister or whatever people want to call them. They're asking to be called who they are. And so, I don't know, I really wanted to create something accessible and habits we overlook as part of the healing journey.
I think you did an incredible job of that.
You think so?
Yes, you did. And so my last question I want to ask you is, if you could see the world, if it could be Nakeia's world, what would it look like?
Wow. I have a world I can create. Yeah. It would look diverse. It would look like a Black girl from the projects and a white woman from Minnesota. Yeah. Both being beautiful and brilliant and honored by the story of their lives. It would be someone who is working through a medical diagnosis like me and not hiding or shrinking because they don't look or feel the way they thought they feel. It would be a woman who is still honoring her womanhood regardless of her orientation, regardless of her status, regardless of all of the things we project onto women. It would be men feeling safe. And that's really important to me. That's going to be in the middle of my world, where my dad has a place, my son has a place, and our husbands and all of the men that we love to feel safe with their emotions, that they don't have to pretend or emote differently because of who they are. There would be some Pepsi and a lot of water. I want to make Pepsi healthy. I don't know. I know I'm talking to the wrong person when I say this.
I've seen some brands go healthy.
I'm joking.
They might do it. Maybe we should have a conversation.
Right.
Pepsi for well-being. Can we figure it out?
But it would just be filled with things that we like and then also things that we need. It's about also, again, doing what you need. The reason why I give myself that cup of Pepsi is because I also honor the water that I need to drink all day. So yeah, that's my world.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. And I think it's so beautiful for us to say, because we have there's so much going on, so much toxicity. But when do we sit and say, okay, well, if it's your world and you created it, how would it look? You know, and I think
a beautiful question.
We should dream more.
But I know this is your interview, but I want to know what your world looks like.
I know my world.
I do.
Girl, we will all have gardens.
I knew it.
Something that tastes like Pepsi, but it's not Pepsi.
Thank you.
Everything is like organic, natural, thriving. Everyone is experiencing the epitome of health and well-being. Wow. Everyone feels confident, fully expressing themselves and their quirks and their excellence and everything in between. There would be no killing, no guns. Animals would be everywhere. The fish would be happy. Everything would just be vibrating at the frequency of love. And everything we put in our body would feel like love, look like love, and everybody would be happy.
I knew I needed to hear that too. I knew I needed. I'm coming to your world.
Oh yeah, come on, girl. And I just think it's so important for us to dream, because I feel like we are living our ancestors' dream. And so if we give ourselves this opportunity to dream of the world that we want to see, then we're gonna move towards that direction. And I think it's, sometimes we can be overwhelmed with all the things that are not going right, but a lot of things are better than they were.
Right.
And a lot of things we're stuck in the past. So it's about looking at that and just collectively saying, how can we change? And I love that we met in person, because you are committed to healing, you're committed to well-being, as myself. And again, it looks different, but I think it's important to have different perspectives of what well-being even looks like.
That's true.
Right? Because that's what makes us well as a community and humanity. And I feel like the more that we come together and honor my well-being, your well-being, its differences, its similarities, that's when we really start to heal as a collective. We shouldn't all be cookie cutter. We shouldn't all be the same. And in my world, even though everyone's healthy, they're still very beautifully different. There still might be disabilities. There still might be people speaking different. Everyone will be looking different. Everyone will have their own sense of style. It'll be different. But I think that's what's beautiful. And I think sometimes we lose and miss out because we're trying to make things so the same. And no one is the same. No one should be the same. But if we're all celebrated for our unique differences, that's when the world wins.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Well, thank you so much for coming. I can't wait to finish your book, Habits for Healing. I want the Audible too, because I want to hear your voice. I want to hear you speaking to me on my way to sleep. But this is such an incredible book. I think everyone should reclaim their purpose, their peace, and their power. Thanks for explaining that to us, and just being a beautiful way that healing is happening on the planet. Thanks for being you. Everything you've been through and gone through has been a blessing, and it's a part of how you bless the world. So
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Until next time, love yourself, love others, and love the world. One day at a time, one breath at a time. If you got any incredible takeaways, please tag us on social media. Let us know. And don't forget to leave me a review. If you love and adore this podcast, leave me a 5-star review. Tell me your favorite episode or your biggest takeaways. And if you have some suggestions on how I could be better, please email me, Koya@KoyaWebb.com. I'm always open to growth and expansion, so I would love to hear from you either way. Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye.